Minash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Dear friends, welcome to Idea Foundation Forum. Today we will discuss the research topic, People's Power Can Reverse the Muslims' Decadence. In the previous few lectures, we tried to summarize major reasons of the Muslims' decadence under 6 captions, namely 1. Sectarianism, 2. Ibadat lost the spirit of character building, 3. Intellectual stagnation, 4. Non-participative, non-inclusive attitudes, 5. Silent majorities, failure in identifying the enemy and fight it out, and the 6th is failure in depicting the real face of Islam. We also discussed in lecture 139 the role of spirituality in building character of the man that could enable him establish a just, peaceful, free and progressive society to ensure submission to the will of Allah and well-being of the humanity as the vicegerent of Allah on the earth. In lecture 141, we discussed a powerful philosophy given by Islam to build a strong castle, fortress of human rights and well-being of the humanity. In these lectures, we saw how small but powerful elites have been keeping the vast majorities of peoples subjugated, depriving them of their fundamental socio-economic rights to protect and promote their elitist interests by perpetuating, extorting people's wealth and power. These lectures lead to an understanding that it was sheer ignorance of vast majorities of the peoples about the free and dynamic personality imbued with huge physical, cognitive and spiritual powers that each and every individual had been divinely accorded to establish a faithful, just, free and progressive society, struggling hard against the forces impeding the course of collective well-being of the mankind. Consciousness of this divine gift and readiness to employ the latent abilities can generate formidable people's power to reverse the flow of history so far designed by the elitist exploitative interests against the humanity. In the next few lectures, we will focus on the potentials of people's power for creating a new hope for the humanity in our growing pluralistic environment. What is pluralistic environment? Democratic environment. Initiating this discussion, today we will focus on the subtopic protection of people's interests from the elitist subjugation. So, dear friends, the elitist rule existed since the human beings started living in tribes or clans at the very, very early age of the mankind. With the growth of human societies and socio-economic compulsions, several political unions were found in the earlier human history that subsequently developed into monarchies, oligarchies, aristocracies, theocracies, etc. All these political unions or political entities witnessed the elitist rule in varieties of forms and shades. Thou democracy, as a political institution based on pluralistic principle of governance, or sloganized as the government of the people, by the people, for the people, has been a popular pursuit since the pre-Platonic age, before Plato. Yet, despite this fact, it remained inflicted heavily with elitist influence and control, mostly through less pronounced means, relatively hidden means. Analyzing the predominant role of elitist minorities in all the forms of governments, including democracy, Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian sociologist, propounded the theory of circulation of elites, establishing that a minority will always dominate over the majority, and history is just a story of one elite replacing another. This idea was further asserted by the German-born Italian sociologist Robert Michael in 1911 as Iron Law of Oligarchy, stating that rule by an elite, governance by an elite or oligarchy is inevitable, is essential within any democratic organization as a tactical and technical necessity of the organization or of the government. To him, no country or a large organization can function purely as a direct democracy. Thus, power within the country or organization gets delegated to a small group, elected or otherwise, for the reason of efficient decision making, which eventually, with the passage of time, which eventually turns into oligarchy or leadership class, kitchen cabinet, or bureaucracy of the system. However, another eminent sociologist, Darcy K. Leach, comments on this necessary evil as, if bureaucracy happens, power rises. When power rises, power corrupts. They, instead of being servants of the masses, who? The elites. They, instead of being servants of the masses, very often become dominant factor in the power structure. The interests of the masses get slaughtered to feed the elitist monsters through exclusive and extortive political economic institutions. So, dear friends, in the previous lecture number 141, we have made a comparison between the prophetic mission and the elitist mind of the elites. The prophetic mission has been advocating individuals' rights netted into collective interest of the human society to ensure its sustainable well-being and progress by promoting faith, equity, justice, growth, and fair play at all levels. While, on the other hand, elitism, as history tells us, history tells us. Elitism has mostly preferred self-interest over social interest. Self-interest is personal interest. Over social interest is collective interest of the society. One. And materialism and determinism over progressivism, spiritualism, and evolutionism. Such elitist mindset has been predominant cause of human sufferings over the human history. Materialism and self-interest or individualism promoted concentration of wealth and power in a few hands that happened to be the flesh and blood of socio-economic evils and greatest threat to social equity, justice, and public ethics. Very important. It perpetuated the elitist, ruthless rule over the passively compliant masses and complete control over the state resources for their own benefits through exclusive institutions. Exclusive institutions are also organized and managed by a selected class. Everybody is not allowed to enter. It was, in fact, enslaving the vast majorities of populations by very thin elitist minorities concentrating the politico-economic power in their hands by employing unjust, unfair, and coercive means of governance and entitlements. Masses were made to believe, unfortunate. Masses were made to believe their miseries as verdict of destiny, propagated through the doctrine of determinism, maliciously designed by politico-religious elites, connivance of political and religious elites to deceive the masses. It buried, killed the initiatives of free personality that could urge individuals to stand against injustice and fight for their rights to emerge as a formidable force of a dynamic society. This was the dilemma that the prophetic mission was supposed to reverse. So, dear friends, in view of elitist socio-economic subjugation of the majorities of populations, the prophetic mission opposed concentration of wealth and power to save humanity from socio-economic disequilibrium and socio-political divisions. The objectives of the mission have been to establish, firstly, faith in the oneness of Allah and His sovereignty over all matters of the universe. Secondly, an environment of justice, equity, learning, and order to promote peace, freedom, and sustainable growth aimed at collective well-being of the humanity. Thirdly, equality of rights and entitlements among all the citizens without any discrimination based on socio-political and geographic distinctions. And fourthly, ensure adequate provisions to meet basic needs of the people. Allah's messengers have been awakening their respective peoples to achieve the said objectives and fight against tyranny, injustice, and other socio-economic abuses in the human society caused by the elitist forces of evil. Quranic message is very expressive, very clear, and commanding to fight against such forces. Dear friends, Hazrat Abraham, custodian of the mission to which the Judaism, Christianity and Islam belong, disproved, rejected the socio-economic disequilibrium prevailing in his age through a historic public proclamation in the words, listen, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The proclamation made by Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this context was even much more revolutionary when he said, he is not a Muslim who eats his fill when his neighbor is hungry. Hazrat Moses and Jesus also had to fight for the salvage of majorities of their peoples suffering from tyrannical rule or castrated by small but powerful elites on the basis of extreme socio-political and economic disparities and discrimination on various reasons. What are these various reasons? Color, caste, geography, etc. As faced by earlier messengers, the elites of Mecca fought with Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, knowing that he had not come just to change people's religious beliefs, but also socio-political disparities and economic disequilibrium established by them. So, dear friends, cognizant of the fact that concentration of wealth was the prime source of elitist power responsible for socio-economic and political disequilibrium against the masses, the Quran revealed revolutionary measures, not measures, revolutionary measures to dilute concentration of wealth to the advantage of vast deprived majorities through the institution of zakat and charity, prohibition of interest, and strict constraints against profiteering, for fair distribution of a deceased person's wealth and avoid its concentration of wealth. The Quran has laid down detailed inheritance laws where share of female members of the family has also been made mandatory, not optional, mandatory. We must keep in mind. Besides social equity among various segments of society, the Quran has also given equal rights to the man and woman in this world as well as in the life hereafter. Mind, here in this world and also in the life hereafter. A few Quranic verses containing revolutionary measures to establish socio-economic equilibrium, protecting the interests of deprived masses in a Muslim society have been displayed on the screen. Kindly study them at your leisure time. Dear friends, to ensure socio-economic equilibrium by protecting the interests of deprived majorities against the excesses of the elite minorities, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam summed up Quranic message in his farewell sermon during his last Hajj in 632. It provides fundamental principles. Guiding principles for protection of human rights and socio-economic equilibrium as we discussed in lecture 141. Though these principles overshadow the protocols of human rights initiated by the Magna Carta in 1215. But unfortunately, they could neither be converted into a workable legal framework for peaceful transfer of power and socio-economic justice, equity, peace, and progress. And nor, one we have discussed, nor any commendable people's movement could ever be witnessed to this end in the Muslim world, despite having great intellectual support behind. So, dear friends, in the Western world, massive efforts have been made to check the excesses of governing elites against deprived majorities since the initiative of Magna Carta, backed by hundreds of its follow-ups, movements, Glorious Revolution, French Revolution, American Revolution, People's Charter, and ongoing United Nations protocols on human rights. But despite these efforts, very wonderful efforts, very strong efforts, the ghost of circulation of elites, try to understand. Despite these efforts, the ghost of circulation of elites keeps haunting even our modern democracies in the shape of various oligarchic strongholds, negating the interests of deprived majorities in the national policy framework. Even people's fundamental rights, basic rights, are being undermined to serve international elitist interests through covert or overt means. Covert or overt, that those can be seen, those can't be seen, hidden. Especially in the third world countries, as some light has been thrown on these modern devilish trends by John Perkins in his book Confessions of an Economic Hitman very recently. Just imagine, Allahu Akbar. Now listen, just imagine, think on it. Allah had forewarned, told us in advance, the man, us, Allah had forewarned the man about such mischievous designs and deceptive traps that Iblis and his accomplices, who are his accomplices? These elitist forces, Iblis and his accomplices could inflict upon humanity to perpetuate its servitude befitting to the elitist interests. Note the divine predictive words of Ayat 27 of Surah Al-Araf. Note each word of the verse. O children of Adam, O mankind, let not Satan tempt, Satan, devil, Iblis, let not Satan tempt you as he removed your parents from paradise, stripping them of their clothing to show them their private parts. Next part is very, very important and relevant today. Indeed, he sees you, Iblis, he sees you. He and his tribe, Iblis and friends of Iblis, elitist of today and elitist of the past, from where you do not see them. Let me repeat it for your understanding. O children of Adam, let not Satan tempt you as he removed your parents from paradise, stripping them of their clothing to show them their private parts. Indeed, he sees you, he and his tribe, from where you don't see them. You don't see them. Indeed, we have made the devils allies to those who do not believe. Recurrence of circulation of elites, confessions of an economic hitman, clash of civilizations, and likewise divisive slogans of sectarianism. Divisive slogans of sectarianism, in fact, witness the truth of the ayat revealed more than 1400 years ago. Thus, Allah has desired that the Muslims must know the truth. What is the truth? The purpose of their life or interests well. They must know their interests. They must know their purpose of creation. And they must recognize their enemies, apparent and hidden both. You have enemies. Some of them are visible. Most of them are not visible. They are hidden. And their deceptive designs to stay upright. Above all, the Muslims must stand united to protect their interests and defeat divisive slogans of sectarianism raised by the enemies of Islam. Enemies of Islam. When you think about sectarianism, you must think on it. Who has created them? These sectarianism has been created by the enemies of Islam because they wanted to divide us. Our prime objectives derived from the purpose of the man's creation as detailed in lecture 3 are to promote faith. What is faith? 6 articles of faith: justice, equity, peace, progress, intellectual growth and freedom in the human society. Equalitarianism as the doctrine of equality of the citizens of a state in all the socio-economic and political spheres of life is the hallmark of Islamic teachings, which smashes the idol of elitism in whatsoever form it exists. A spoiler, listen, a spoiler of Muslims' unity or of the said objectives must be marked as clear enemy of Islam. Let me repeat. Any spoiler of Muslims' unity or of the said objectives must be underlined, must be marked, must be highlighted as clear enemy of Islam. It is a sure litmus test to differentiate between friends and foes. Faith weakens when it is put to religious disputations. When faith weakens, unity of the Muslims is fragmented. That leads to total destruction. This is what we have been witnessing around the Muslim world in the past and even today. For that, Allah has directed the Muslims to strictly follow the Quran to avoid religious disputations and disunity as revealed in ayat 103 and 105 of Surah Al-Imran. So my dear friends, the Quran has revealed Allah's intention at several places urging the Muslims to support good and fight out evils like injustice, inequities, and all sorts of oppressions inflicted by the elitist evil forces on the mankind. With the knowledge of the enemy, yani if you know the enemy, and strength of unity, the believers are directed to fight against evil forces until oppression is eliminated and justice and peace is restored. There is no room, mind it, there is no room for silence, indifference, or compromise on the truth. The Quran has given great emphasis on this point. For that, please study Ayat 143 of Surah Baqarah, 104 and 110 of Surah Al Imran, and Ayat 1 to 3 of Surah Al Asr. However, two verses from Surah An-Nisa and Al-Ma'idah are quoted here. Please note each word urging the believers to stand against the evil honestly, vocally, and firmly to promote the truth and protection of people's interest from the elitist subjugation. It is surely a great leap forward to reverse the decadence that the Muslims have been facing since long. Now listen the ayat, verses of Quran. Ayat 135 of Surah An-Nisa. Listen. O ye who believe, means the Muslims, stand out firmly for justice as witness to God, even as against yourselves, or your parents, or your kith and kins, and whether it be against rich or poor. For God can best protect both. Follow not the lust of your hearts, lest ye swerve, and if ye distort justice or decline to do justice, verily God is well acquainted with all that ye do. Then next ayat is ayat 8 of Surah Al-Ma'idah. Listen. O you who have believed, means Muslims, be persistently standing firm for Allah, witnesses in justice, and do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is acquainted with what you do. So, dear friends, we conclude our discussion here. These programs are recorded both in Urdu and English. Their videos can be watched on ideafoundation.com.pk website or its YouTube channel and Facebook. Their written versions are also available on the Idea Foundation's website. Please note code number of this program, Idea 1B R33P1 or lecture number 143. All friends are requested to subscribe the Foundation's YouTube web channel for the benefit of this noble cause. Thank you friends for participation. Allah Hafiz.